Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We had to start out with some technical difficulties, but we are here with the Adventures of the Heart, building wisdom through experience. And I am Cynthia Gardner O'Neill. I am your host tonight because my co-host, Neelan Hawkins, could not make it tonight, and that's why we have this heart venture here. So that when things come up that are most important to us, that we really value, such as things that come up with family and those kind of opportunities.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you so much for coming.
Hold on. I always love to hear myself introduce myself 2 times. So, so we got that all set up and we're ready to go. So thank you so much for joining us. I am Cynthia Gardner O'Neill. I am the founder of the Center for Loving Consciousness, and I also have created some courses and a membership called Harmonics for harmonizing life, harmonizing the heart. And I've had the great opportunity to be here with Dr. Ina Gilmore and Coach Dave Sheldon, and I am excited to have them as my guests tonight. And I have also had the opportunity to participate with them in some of their Happy and Healthy Caregiver Telesummit, and we're going to talk a little bit about what they have going on, and we're going to discuss the essential information about the challenges and solutions of caregiving Alzheimer's. We'll explore how caregiving affects the caregiver, family, and business. So I'm here tonight to introduce to you, we have Dr. Ina Gilmore and Coach Dave Sheldon. And I'm going to start with Ina. Why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'll bring Dave in here.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm an infectious disease and internal medicine physician who's been a family caregiver. And I started Caregiving with Purpose a few years ago, which is a website. When I was caring for my mom, I realized that family caregivers really often get missed in the professional caregivers, and I really felt as though they are the silent people, and I wanted to give them a voice.
Beautiful, and you have given a voice, that is for certain. And you know, then we have Dave Sheldon, and he has participated with you in all this. So I want to hear about Dave. I would love for you to introduce yourself. And then I'd also like to hear about how you two got together, and you know, especially about this subject. So Dave, come on in. I love hearing about all about you, and we have some background ourselves together, don't we?
Well, let's not get into that over the air, Cynthia, please. And actually, it's kind of interesting because my name's Dave Sheldon, and I'm a certified professional coach my specialty is health and wellness, and my background includes when Cynthia and I first met many years ago.
Yeah.
At that time, I was the director of the health coach training program, which is a 1-year certification program for people who wanted to become health coaches, and did that for many years, and since then have worked with a variety of people in different ways around issues of health and wellness. And to answer your question about how Ina and I first met, we had a mutual acquaintance, and Ina really wanted to do a telesummit about Alzheimer's. We got introduced, and she knew about my background in not only coaching, but also in speaking and doing events, things of that nature. And we got together and did that telesummit. Had a tremendous success with it. We could go on for this entire hour and talk about that. But since then, Cynthia, we have partnered together. Dr. Ina and I have partnered together, and just like you, we have created some programs for caregivers at Caregiving for Purpose, and are continuing to do monthly webinars, and in fact, have been talking about planning another telesummit for later on this year that you'll be hearing more about too. So in a nutshell, that's a little bit about me and what Dr. Ina and I do together.
Fabulous. I'm also just to stop here for a minute because I'm getting some feedback and I'm not sure where we're getting that from, and I'm just going to see if we can. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have you guys each mute yourself, and we'll unmute when we when I'll ask some questions and everything, and you guys come in and tell me about things. We'll see if that helps with cutting out that kind of echo that we're having here. Are you hearing that on your end, David?
No.
Okay. And how about you, Ina?
Off and on, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself in just a moment. What I'm going to do is both you two have some extraordinary stories to be telling about what brought you in here, about helping out with the Alzheimer and caregivers, your telesummits that you've been having. And I know you've had this, we were talking about discussing the essential information about the challenges and solutions of caregivers in Alzheimer. And I'd like for you to go ahead and get started with all these things that you've been putting together and your own experiences that you've had. So I think our stories are so important to why and how we've become involved in this kind of opportunity to be of service and help one another.
You know, that's really true, Cynthia. As a matter of fact, in our workshops and classes, we always begin with a story from Dr. Ina, just because it conveys so much of what this is all about. So, Dr. Ina, how about telling us about your mom and some of the great stories that you have?
I'm having trouble hearing again.
We've been having some technical difficulties on this today, so.
So
yeah.
you wanted me to talk about the stories that I tell? Was that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I have almost 20 years of experience as a physician, and so there are a lot of stories that come up, and some of them are family caregiving too, not just caring for my parents, but caring for other family members. And some of those stories really illustrate the point of whatever we're talking about, and that it's just amazing how well they seem to mesh, whether it's talking about the loneliness of caregiving, whether it's talking about a specific problem that comes up, sometimes with certain diseases. It's just, it's wonderful. And with Dave's coaching, I've become a much better storyteller, I think, than I was before.
Nice. And I know there's a specific story of your own that that you tell, and I really like to hear more about even your core story. We call it, I know there's a specific person, Lisa, that you speak about, and how she, you've worked with that whole idea of what it is that is your ideal client, who you're there to help and serve. And I'd like to hear more about that because I know people are really going to be taken by that story.
Sure. Lisa is, again, when I was developing Caregiving with Purpose, I wanted to find my ideal customer, the ideal person to come and look for it. So I started doing research on just who caregivers are, especially in the United States, but of course they're all over the world. And I found that the average caregiver is 49 years old. And that's actually been true for the last 5 years. So Lisa has not aged. She was 49 5 years ago, and she's still 49, which I think is just wonderful. We should all do that. But I did a research, and Lisa is married. She has 2 children. They are adult children, and she has a mother. And her mother, Helen, is a widow with Alzheimer's disease, who also has diabetes and some other medical concerns. And I went through and did an entire description of who Lisa is, came up with her name actually by 5 years ago when I started, went back to somebody that was born in 49 years before, and Lisa was one of the most popular names. So that's how Lisa came about. And her husband is David, and and I said she has a mother, Helen. All of these folks, they drive a minivan, and they live in a suburban area, and they go to church, and there's a whole story associated with them.
Yeah, and this kind of helped you really hone in on the type of person that you want to be of service to, and know what you're reaching out and who you're touching. And it's funny that you had David in there, already, and here you are working with him today. So, well, tell us a little bit more. You guys have been putting together these great caregiver and about caregiving and Alzheimer, and how that you can support them and bring them help. And you've been a lot of your things you've been gifting because you have so much concern about their time that they have. And sometimes we don't have enough time to learn about how we can be a better caregiver, how we can support the person that we're giving care to. And you've been bringing together some great telesummits and opportunities for people to learn more about it and make it easier for them.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Actually, that's one of the challenges with caregiving, is that if you look at it, there are about I think the number is it's 43 million caregivers in the United States that are unpaid, and only 1 in 6 of them identifies themselves as a caregiver. They think about themselves as a daughter or a son or a spouse or something along those lines, or family member. They don't really consider themselves a caregiver. So that's part of the problem, is that caregivers don't realize that they're caregivers, and they don't know where to find the information. So we've been trying to do that, and with those telesummits, we've gotten some fabulous speakers. Some of them are, for the Alzheimer's telesummits, they're in the Alzheimer's world, and some of them are very well known. They're globally known as far as speakers and up to date on some of the most recent research that's out there. And getting that together for folks has just been a joy and a pleasure, again, because we make that available to folks who otherwise you don't know how to find it. And there's so much information on the internet, so much information out there, you don't know how to weed through it to get it. Not only that you can understand it, because a lot of the information is in medical speak, but also so that you just know where the information is to find it in the first place.
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming, for sure. And also who to trust.
Absolutely.
How do you deal with those kind of issues? I know those are very stressful situations that people are in when they find themselves needing help and trying to figure out where to go, who to connect with, who to get help with. What do you suggest for that? Can you hear me?
No.
Oh, Dave, can you hear? Because I know you can probably maybe help out and come in with this a little bit until Ina we can get something set up for her.
Sure.
What have you guys been doing to connect with people and getting your information out so you can give them a better opportunity to find safe places to get that information? Yeah, I think Ina's still, having difficulties with.
It looks like Ina's still having some technical difficulties. So to answer your question, Cynthia.
Yes.
It is. First, I'd just like to share a little bit more about my story in regards to all of this that we're talking about, because I've had, like most of us, I've had my share of medical challenges, shall we say. I'm a cancer survivor, and I've had some other medical adventures over the course of my life. But I've never had any personal experience with family or friends of anyone who had Alzheimer's or dementia. And this condition, which although there are certainly some encouraging things happening right now in terms of the research as to the causes and treatment and possibly prevention down the road too. For right now, it is considered a quote-unquote incurable disease.
Right.
To be frank, in other words, it's pretty much a death sentence if a doctor tells you that you've got Alzheimer's. And for the caregivers, Ina was just starting to say, when we could still hear her, that there are about 45 million caregivers in the United States right now. And most of them, only 1 out of 6 actually consider themselves to be a caregiver. Nevertheless, you know, and we talk to people all the time and hear about the devastating emotional impact that something like this has, where especially if you're a family caregiver and you're watching a parent or a spouse, what has been called the slow fade, where they seem to be disappearing, although I hope we're going to be able to hear from Ina a little later on, because she has some really neat stories about the reality of that. Nevertheless, it is just so devastating for caregivers, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and spiritually, for that matter, too. You know, in all of those areas, it can just be so challenging, and that's really a big part of our mission, is to be able to reach out to those folks and offer them the help and support, the resources that we have at Caregiving with Purpose, and also to be able to give them other organizations and resources where they can go to get more information about the condition, so that they can understand the stages and what they can anticipate is going to be happening. But again, for all the caregivers out there that might be watching and listening to us right now, I would urge them to find a place where there is a community, where there's that emotional and psychological support from people who know what it's like and understand what it's like, and at the same time can also offer that vision of you know, that connection that you can get when you can be connected to purpose, which of course is why we call it Caregiving with Purpose. Because while certainly it can be very tragic and traumatic, also it can be very life-affirming in many ways when you're able to have those kind of connections and that level of help and support.
Beautiful. I so agree with all that, and I'm so grateful that you guys are providing that kind of information and support. Also, you know, you guys had this a telesummit that I was on, and it was, I think it was October or November, wasn't it?
November.
Oh, good, she could hear us. There's Ina. Yay. So in November, and it was called the Happy Healthy Caregiver Telesummit. And you guys, that was amazing that I could have that connection with you guys, and you know, I called it the Heart of Caregiving. And that's one thing I heard you speaking of, you know, where you could make a heart connection. And I know, you know, Ina, if you can hear me, we did, during that that presentation that I made, you told a story about the nuns. And it was a story about, you know, with Alzheimer's, because you were just speaking, David, about, you know, how they say that Alzheimer's is incurable, or, you know, all those kind of things, that there isn't much that you can do once that they move into that place of being. And, you know, I found it really fascinating when you told the story about the nuns, Ina. Would you be open to sharing that story with us?
Oh, I'd love to. That's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah.
That's the study of nuns over decades, actually. Over 700 nuns, I believe they're in Kentucky, have been studied and are being studied. And they divided them into groups, whether they were depending upon their level of optimism and happiness, they have 4 different groups. There were the most happy, then there were the ones that weren't quite so happy, and then there were the ones that definitely were less happy, and then the ones that were cranky, I guess you might say, or sad or very pessimistic. And they did studies on them. They found that the ones that were in that group that were the happiest lived longest, lived healthiest, and many of them did not get Alzheimer's. The ones that got Alzheimer's were the ones that were more pessimistic. One of the fascinating things about this study is, though, that they did studies after the nuns died and did tissue studies and found that some of the nuns actually would have been diagnosed by the lab to have Alzheimer's, but never had any symptoms. All of those were in the happiest group. The folks that are the happiest actually may not get Alzheimer's, even if they have the plaques or the changes in the brain. It may never manifest itself as symptoms.
That's, to me, when you told that story, it was so fascinating to get that whole point, because I love telling a story about the Tibetan monks, and that's what we kind of, why we got into, talking about the nuns, and how we do have an opportunity to heal through our love and our compassion, and having fun. So like today, starting off here, we could have stressed out, and stress really, it depletes the oxygen flow into the brain, right? So we could have, not being able to get on this show all of a sudden, we could have gone, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to do this or that, and cause this big, shut off to the brain. And, that's really depleting, when we start going into fear or we start worrying. And worrying is really a consistent thing over fear. Fear is kind of once in a while, but worrying, I think, is the biggest thing that I think that really depletes people. And I always say worrying is like praying for what you don't want. And it puts so much stress on people. And like you said, it just shuts down that whole blood flow to the brain and puts you in that fight or flight. And so when you're, this is just a great example of us being here. Ina's having problem hearing me sometimes, or even David, but we're still flowing with it. We're here to provide you guys with a really heartfelt expression of what we're here to do and be, we want to lead this meaningful life to where we can make a difference in the world. And so, Ina, you can still hear me. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
As far as Alzheimer, what is the biggest thing, what are the biggest stressors as far as that being maybe a cause, and even for caregivers to look out for when they're caring for their the people that they're taking care of? Are there a lot of stressors that actually can take them down the wrong road to, where they're maybe depleting their own health and well-being, and how we can give them something here right now to support them into having better health?
Actually, I didn't hear your question completely. Of course.
It's about, so what can we give people who are caregivers and also the Alzheimer's, that we can support them in giving them a place of ease and grace, and to take them into a healthier, happier life. And that's especially why we did the Happy Healthy Caregiver Telesummit, is to give them opportunities to find those ways where we can express ourselves in better ways to create more and better health.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that's been so exciting in the research recently is that we all know that Alzheimer's starts out with memory loss, and that's a big part of the disease, is the memory loss and personality changes. Well, that's the cognitive memory, that is the thinking memory. They've actually found that that people with Alzheimer's can continue to develop new emotional memories, which means that they can still connect even very late in the disease emotionally with somebody. And one of the big things is a story that we had from just last week from woman, Maggie Latourelle, who's written a wonderful book called The Gift of Alzheimer's. And she talks about her mother, how her mother had Alzheimer's, and in the late stages of her Alzheimer's, she developed unconditional love for the first time in her life. She knew what it was, and she gave it to Maggie. And isn't that a wonderful blessing to be able to find love in the midst of a devastating disease like that? And she made wonderful connections and was actually, it sounded as though she was at peace when she hadn't been before. And there's another story that I have of a friend who told me about her mother-in-law, who came from a family of painters and artists. And this woman never considered herself artistic in any way. She was frugal, and she did a lot of things, like maybe sewing, that sort of thing, but she never considered herself an artist, even though her parents were painters, artists like that. And when she developed Alzheimer's, she forgot that she wasn't an artist. And she did beautiful paintings. I mean, I saw one. It was so realistic. You would never. I would never have thought that somebody in an advanced stage of Alzheimer's would be painting like that. But it was just magnificent. And this can happen if caregivers can. One of the things to do is to just kind of let it go. And you cannot change somebody if they've made their decision that, you know, they don't want to go to the shower, or they want to eat off a yellow plate or whatever. You can't change their mind when they have a memory impairment, but you can go with the flow, and you can give them the unconditional support and love, and find that they will reflect it back to you. And they've studied that and found that people with Alzheimer's do respond emotionally and will reflect back the same emotions that the caregiver gives to them.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I want to speak to that because, I believe that that's the heart. The heart that's where the emotions are. That's where we really make a connection when we go to our heart. And, it's not about the brain then. And so when we just, as you said, love unconditionally, just accept them just as they are, you're in that coherency of your heart. You're in this harmony in your heart. And guess what? They feel it. They feel the harmony. When we go in and we start going, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, or she doesn't remember me, or this or that, you're carrying a frequency in the heart that they feel. And that's what gets confusing for people. That's what I've learned about, since I teach harmonics. A lot of times we feel first before we think. And feeling, feeling has been desensitized. So I'm getting a little feedback, so I apologize. So if we get into our hearts and we begin to feel again, no feeling, no healing, you can feel what other people are feeling, and you can respond from that opportunity rather than getting into the part where we start thinking, oh, I wonder what they're thinking, I wonder what they're doing, and we get in this discordant energy in our hearts. So I think that's really important that you brought up that whole information and that story about the woman just coming in and just accepting and going with the flow. And that's what we're doing here right now. We're going with the flow. We're getting a little feedback and we're getting this and that, but here we are going with the flow. And I'm loving it because I feel your hearts, and that's what we're here in Adventures of the Heart, and we're building wisdom through experience. What do you think about that, David?
I think that is just beautiful, Cynthia. And what you're talking about, being heart-centered versus being head-centered.
Yes.
There is certainly a whole school of thought around our levels of awareness and our levels of perception. And what you're really talking about is just what Ina was talking about also, what we can feel and sense in ways that aren't necessarily communicated by language or logical thought. It's that unconditional love that you were talking about. And that's just, I think, so important for what we're talking about tonight, because you mentioned stress a little while ago, for example, and that's certainly one of the big factors associated with caregiving, and of course other aspects of life too. But stress, for example, is all about perception, and how one person perceives a situation is not necessarily how another person perceives it. To step out of the medical realm for a moment, if you will, just in everyday life and events in life. And sometimes those big events in life, we lose a job or something else traumatic happens. For some people, depending on how their mind works and how it interacts with their emotions, they can look at an event like losing a job and go, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to find another job? How am I going to support myself? How am I going to take care of my family? You know, all of those worries that you talked about, that fear-based thinking from the ego, from the head, is one whole realm of that. And the impact that that has on the body is horrifying. There are many so-called experts who say that that kind of stress is at the root of many of our modern-day lifestyle diseases that we experience.
Absolutely.
So, you know, that's the one side of that coin. On the other side of that coin, let's say, is the person who looks at that same event of, you know, losing a job and going, well, you know what? I didn't really like working there. And I've always been able to find jobs, and I'm really good at what I do, and I know that with just a little bit of effort I can go out and find myself an even better job. You know what? This could be a blessing. And I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but what a difference in that feeling, that heart-based feeling of being connected, being secure, being provided for.
Yes.
It makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
And that's, to bring it back into what we're talking about now, is the difference that we're talking about for a caregiver who very often can be thrust into something like this with a diagnosis or other events that can happen. And it's very easy for that person to be able to go, oh my God, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? How am I going to deal with all of, and all of that fear that comes to the surface and can literally strangle someone with stress.
Yes.
Versus someone who, let's say, at the very least, can say, wow, there's a lot that I need to know about here, and there's some stuff that I need to work through. I need to find somebody that I can talk to about this. I need to find somebody who's been through this before and has some answers. And somehow those answers ultimately always lead to the heart and to love.
Absolutely. You guys, when I was with you, you had some wonderful people who came to your telesummit, and they talked about the heart and play and collaboration and relationship and contribution, and these are things that make a difference as far as us feeling as if we are leading in, like we have a world. And it does make a difference. Are you guys hearing me okay? Because I'm still getting some of this feedback. I just want to make sure people are hearing me all right. So I want to tell, with that kind of expression, I just want to share just a quick story. And then I want to hear about where people can go and how they can connect with you, what you guys have available, because you guys have some great workshops coming up, or you have one that's been going on for a little while. But I want to hear more about all that, and you guys sharing about this compassion and this love and the heart space. There's a quick story I have about the Tibetan monks who were beaten, incarcerated, and tortured, and they did a study on them a couple of years ago because they're living beyond their 100th year, and they're living vibrant and healthy and happy. And they did physical studies on them to find out how they're doing this, and they found that they're still making stem cells. You know, stem cells, they are non-determined cells. You know, they can go, when the stem cells are constantly being made, they go where they're needed to keep us, you know, youthful and young and happy and vibrant. And one of the things, Dalai Lama was there, and Dalai Lama asked one of these monks, he said, what's the hardest thing you went through when you were incarcerated during that time? And the monk replied, my greatest fear was that I'd lose compassion for my enemy. Like you said about people, they perceive them, you know, as human beings and love them. And they continue to have compassion for them. And therefore, guess what? They went through this whole experience and stayed within peace inside of themselves. They kept that peace, that harmonic heart going. And so therefore, their bodies continued to support them with stem cells. And so when you talked about perception, that was huge, because that's one of the things I love to teach people, is about changing the perception, because it's our choice that we make that put us in stress. So, and what are those stressors, and where can we go to help relieve that stress? Can you hear me still, Ina?
Yeah, I can hear you. Well, there are there are lots of stresses with caregiving. Just having to suddenly be responsible for somebody else is a huge stress. And there are always other things that come up, are like safety issues. All of a sudden, you may find that the shag rug that you have or the throw rugs are no longer safe because somebody might be likely to fall. That's a big problem with elders, and also with folks with Alzheimer's and other dementias. There are physical stresses that can occur with caregiving. Suddenly you're doing activities of daily living for somebody. You may be starting out with helping them to get in and out of bed or in and out of a chair. That can move into things like doing very personal grooming, getting them on and off the toilet, into the shower or the bathtub. Some of those things are kind of embarrassing for folks, and it can take a while for both the caregiver and the care receiver to feel comfortable with that kind of very personal care. But it is terribly important. It's very important. Sometimes the person that you're giving care to doesn't realize they have a problem. That occurred with my mom. She developed a bed sore. Actually, she wasn't even bedridden at the time, but on her bottom. And she didn't realize it until I checked her and saw that she was starting to develop it. We got it in time and had no problems with it. But that's a very important thing, because I've seen people that have had bed sores, that those infections can go down to the bone and be impossible to treat. And that's something very big that even personal care, for a caregiver, that can be a very big reason to do it, to prevent those nasty, nasty infections. Also, caregiving has changed a lot in the last 20 years with the changes in insurance and why people are hospitalized. Now more and more caregivers are doing more nursing tasks at home, but they're also doing medical tasks. They're giving injections, they're doing tube feedings. Certainly, juggling multiple medications is confusing, but that's done by an RN usually in a nursing home or in a hospital. And we're asking caregivers to do it, and a lot of times they don't feel comfortable with some of these things. They may be changing catheters, dealing with catheter care. There are lots of things like that. Plus, there are stresses, because you're so focused on someone else, there are stresses that are isolation, and the emotional stress of caring for a loved one who is chronically ill or terminally ill. It may not have been your choice to be a caregiver, and it's someone that you love. That you're having to deal with not only the day-to-day things, but also the long-term things. Are you starting to think about a lot of caregivers have to make decisions about end-of-life care. And that's really scary to make that kind of a decision for somebody else. It can be very stressful.
Yeah. Yes, that can change everything. I've had that experience. You know, I call it a blessing that I've been able to work with people who have had chronic diseases and everything, and help them change their perception not only about themselves, but about, you know, the people who are caregiving to them. And at the same time, when I work with them, I help the caregiver also change their perception about who they're giving care to. And it is about bringing in that place of seeing one another as, and the love that we're giving to each other, that we have that relationship, that we have someone there who does care for us, and that we can. One of the big things that I've taught a few of my people that I gave care to is to find that peace inside of them, to know that what they're experiencing can contribute to the world with their story, and that they do have something to give, that they do have something to provide others through their experience. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to accept, especially if it's so painful. And you know, one of my favorite quotes from Rumi is, "The cure for pain is in the pain." And that's really our stories, and how we can come out and help others and find that peace inside of ourselves. So that, you know, you bringing in all those kind of things that we go into when we're giving care to people, and how the other person is not aware of their own feelings, their own experience, and where to go with that. So where do they go with that? What can we do about helping them find a better place in life? And what kind of information do you have to provide? And where can we get it?
Well, we have a lot of things on the website. There are lots of blog posts. There are over 200 blog posts now on caregiving with purpose. We also have a monthly webinar for folks, and we're covering some of the big stressors and some of the big concerns that folks have. We've talked about stress. We've talked about change. You know, how to make change in your own life and how to make it, why it doesn't work. Not only in your own life, but when you try and change the behavior of someone else, how best you can do that. And we also have some programs that we're really excited about that we're starting. We have a session for folks that they can go to the website and get sign up for a 15-minute session to get some of their questions answered. I also have a resources section on the website where we have listed some other programs, some other organizations that can help people, and that's continuing to be expanded as I get more things lined up for it. In there, some of them are really pretty interesting. There's a website that specifically makes puzzles for Alzheimer's patients, which I think is really interesting. They're 16-piece puzzles that are really big, the jigsaw puzzles, and they particularly pick pictures that someone that is an older person would identify with. So it isn't going to be the Ninja Turtles type thing, but cartoons. But it's going to be landscapes or something else that someone would like. And we also have some other activities that Alzheimer's or caregivers may find helpful in there. Some of the associations can be helpful, and we're looking also. If somebody has resources they want us to put up, let us know, and we'll be happy to consider it.
And what's that link? So I'll post that for everybody, but I'd like for you to tell us where to go.
Well, they can go to caregivingwithpurpose.com and just go at the top there, and the resources page, there's a drop-down menu that will give them the list of the organizations is the one of the drop-downs that I was talking about. There's also a list of articles there. And there are other things that are coming up that are right there on the website. If they go ahead and look around on the website, they can find that. Our program, we have a new program out for caregivers. It's a 9-week program. That's under programs. They can learn more about it there. And just kind of look around and click on things. You're not going to break anything. And we have some fun flip boxes for people to even try if they answer some of the most questions that folks have, some of the frequently asked questions. We have those on the homepage, caregivingwithpurpose.com.
Now, also, you shared with me that you had a heart plan.
Yes, we have a heart plan. And that's something that started out as a way for caregivers it was a way that I thought would help caregivers. I wished I had had it when I was caring for my mom, but it's a way to look real quickly and get a way to relieve your stress, to start thinking about things. And I can go real quickly through the letters if you like.
That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to let everybody know what we're going to do is that Ina's going to go through this heart plan with you. And then I'm going to go ahead. Do you guys have time we have a couple people who are dealing with being a caregiver for Alzheimer's, and they want to talk to you afterwards. Do you have time to do an after call for a few minutes, or do you need to get going?
I'm fine.
Okay. So I'm going to be posting that link, and then so Ina, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the heart plan?
Okay. It's a heart plan, and each letter stands for a word or phrase. The first A is acceptance, and that's one of the things that caregivers have to really start out is accepting. There are lots of things in caregiving, but starting out to be a caregiver, you have to accept that you're a caregiver. You also have to accept the diagnosis or the condition that the person has that you're giving care to, and then there are other things that go along with that. H is for help. It's okay to ask for help, and everybody needs to ask for help, and that's something sometimes caregivers forget. We get so busy in giving care that we forget that asking for help is okay. You may even ask it of your care receiver, and be surprised that they might want to give it to you. Also, family members a lot of times think the caregiver has everything handled and doesn't need help because they don't ask for it. So asking for help is a big thing. E is for engage. It's important for caregivers to continue to be engaged in life, but also for your care receiver to be engaged in life. That can be a really big part of keeping them interested. We found that with my mom, as far as when she was a big crafter, and we could keep her interested by doing crafts in front of her, and then she felt like she was participating. And we even had her help us pick out colors or fabrics or whatever we were doing, patterns, that sort of thing, and she felt like she was participating. And I think that's something that caregivers can do with activities, is to find something that interests the care receiver. A is for associate. It's really important to continue to have associations with folks. Now, this isn't necessarily formal organizations, but you need to associate with whoever your social group is, as if it's your family, your friends, your church. You don't want to be isolated, which is a big challenge for caregivers, to not become isolated. The R is for remember and reminisce, and they're both there because this can be a time when you can make memories and then you can come back and remember them. And reminiscing is more allowing the person that you're giving care to remember without saying, oh, do you remember? Or can you remember? But allowing them to tell the story, even if it's wrong. That is, even if it's not what you remember, allow them to give you their version of it. It can be very interesting. You can figure out, you can get a funny story out of it sometimes, but sometimes you can find out what they were thinking. And even I found out some things about my mom that I never would have known. And I found out that, I was talking with David the other day, I found out during World War II, margarine, she always called it oleo, and margarine was actually white, and it came with a yellow packet that you added to it to make it yellow. And I mean, I never learned that in history class, but that's something I found out. T is for Thanksgiving and gratitude, two big things that I think really help caregivers. They can relieve stress very quickly when you can find something to be thankful for. Maybe it's that you're still breathing, that you're still standing, you know, at the end of the day. It can be it can be silly. It can be you're thankful for your dog or your cat, or, you know, whatever. You're thankful for the smile that you got today, you know, from your care receiver. Just finding a few things every day to be thankful for and journaling about them or speaking them. Whatever you do can really be helpful. P in a heart plan is for purpose. Sometimes your caregiving can be part of your life purpose, but remembering why you're doing the caregiving and connecting with it can really help when the caregiving gets overwhelming. And, you know, that's important, is to be clear on your purpose. L is for laugh. And certainly we've been doing that this evening, but that is one of the fastest ways to reduce stress. It lowers you can't be angry and laugh at the same time. It lowers your blood pressure, whereas stress raises it. Laughing lowers your heart rate, whereas stress raises it. And 3 belly laughs a day are a really good prescription for folks. Even if you just have to sit there and you can't think of anything funny, so just laugh. You can do it in your shower. You know, you don't have to do it, you know, in front of an audience. But that's one of the best things to do. The last A in a heart plan is for advocate. A caregiver becomes an advocate. Now, you may become an advocate for an organization, you know, particularly after the caregiving, but you're the person that is running interference for your care receiver a lot of times. You may have to talk to the medical personnel, you may have to talk to financial people, lawyers, you may have to screen the telemarketers, you know, on the phone. All kinds of advocacy. You may even have to tell family members or friends that, no, this is not a good day to visit. You know, that's an important part of not only being a caregiver, but also reducing your own stress. And the final letter in a heart plan is nurture. That's N, is for nurture. And don't forget to nurture yourself, to give self-care while you're nurturing somebody else. And that comes out also with the love. When I think of nurturing, I think of a mother's love. That's the first thing that pops into my head.
Beautiful. Oh, are we missing one there, or did we cover all that? Wow.
We got all of them.
Wow.
All 10.
So amazing. And so this is called the heart plan, right?
A heart plan.
A heart plan.
Yeah.
The heart plan. That's probably why I was thinking there was a couple more there. I was ready for the heart.
Maybe I should expand it.
There comes the laughter. There comes the laughter. So, gosh, that's all. You know, I have a PDF that Dr. Ina Gilmore has given me, and I will. I'm going to post a link where you guys can access a heart plan, because I think that is a fabulous plan to follow and to really make a difference in your life. So any last words or any takeaways from you two before we go into the after show? I want to thank you, David Sheldon, for being here. Dr. Ina Gilmore, you guys are amazing. I love what you're doing. You have so much going for you, and you guys, you can find them at caregivingwithpurpose.com. Is that right? Do I have that right?
That's right. Yes.
I'm always missing the letters and stuff like that, so we want to make sure we get that straight. And I will post that link in the information on both events, since we ended up having a second event. Boy, we were really celebrating today. 2 events. All right. So any last words for you two before we go?
It's been a delight and a pleasure to be here.
Yay.
I'd just like to add, Cynthia, thank you so much for everything that you and Lynn are doing
Well,
at Harmonics.
thank you very much.
You also have a very wonderful mission.
And we're happy to be sharing it with everyone. That's our heart venture. We have a heart venture with you, everyone out there. We thank you so much for joining us on these regular Thursdays and have the show here. We really want to bring, you know, that place of feeling back into our hearts, and so that we can connect with one another in just a bigger way and to create a more meaningful life for people. So thank you, too, for being a part of all that. I'm just so blessed. Thank you. I'm very grateful. So now to wrap up, my last thing I love to say to everybody is breathe deep into your heart and love yourself more today than you did yesterday. And we'll see you on the other side of the show. So come join us. I'm getting ready to put that link up. So have a great, we'll talk to you all later. Have a great day.